Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rowan Petz, Executive Director here at the Australian Chamber of Commerce in South Korea. Marking 60 years of diplomatic relations between Australia and Korea, 2021 has been a busy year despite the many challenges that COVID-19 has presented. Hosting already over 40 events this year on behalf of the Chamber, it is my pleasure to introduce you to today's webinar, Exploring Medtech Innovation and Collaboration between Australia and Korea. Aimed at shedding some light on the industry and the developments that are shaking up the medtech sector, today we are very honoured to be hearing from 5 expert speakers. We have Helen Oh, the Trade and Investment Commissioner from Austrade based in Seoul, Ruslan Tursunov, the Project Director at Intralink, Rob Scott, Managing Director of the Asia Technology Incubator. We've got Stephanie Yoon, General Manager of Cochlear Korea, and Jason Chai, Director, Market Access and Government Affairs at Cochlear APAC. So to begin today's webinar, I'd like to now hand it over to Helen Oh, who will provide some opening remarks before we move on to our other presenters. Helen, welcome.
Thank you, Rowan, and good afternoon. And I want to thank AustCham Korea for hosting this virtual event today, and congratulations for providing an excellent opportunity to showcase the world-leading medtech industry capabilities of both Australia and Korea. I'm personally very excited to hear from our presenters today and see our listeners' active participation. To begin with, Australia-Korea relations have always been close. And this year, as Rowan mentioned, marks the 60th anniversary of our diplomatic relations, formally established in 1961. This anniversary is a time for Australia and Korea to reflect on our rich shared history together. And it's also a great opportunity to plot a path forward as we tackle the many challenges that await us. At this moment, the strongest dimension of our bilateral relationship is unquestionably the economic one. Economies are highly complementary as we are similar-sized economies. Korea has the world's 10th largest economy and Australia has the 14th largest economy. Korea is Australia's 4th largest trading partner. And it's true that our relationship has been traditionally anchored in energy and resources. But as we prepare for the economy of the future, Australia and Korea will need to work together to realize the opportunities provided by advances in science, technology, and innovation. And of course, medical technology plays a key part in this. I'm proud to say that Australia is a vibrant country with a strong entrepreneurial and innovative spirit. Our diverse multicultural population provides for different perspectives, which enables us to solve complex problems that power innovation. The impact of Australia's science and innovation is no more apparent than through some of the innovations that have revolutionized the world, including the black box flight recorder invented by David Warren, penicillin for civilian use by Howard Florey, high-speed Wi-Fi by John O'Sullivan in CSIRO, which is making this happen, the cervical cancer vaccine by Ian Fraser, Google Maps by Sydney-based developers, the Rasmussen brothers, and last but not least, our very famous cochlear implants, which you will hear more about from Stephanie and Jason later on. More recently, it's worth noting that Australian researchers were the first in the world to characterize the COVID-19 virus outside of China. I'm pleased to see that Australia has world-leading research projects such as these and institutions and businesses of interest to Korea, particularly with strong capabilities in genomic medicine, digital health, and precision medicine. Our economic complementarity continues here as Korea offers an impressive record with respect to medtech commercialization with both government and industry-led funding. As such, I believe there will be more and more opportunities for our medtech communities to collaborate. Australia and Korea are facing many common challenges, including those that are related to managing COVID-19 and also our aging populations. And we're both better off when working with partners with similar perspectives, values, and interests. And I hope today's webinar will be helpful in generating more of these strategic partnership opportunities and contribute towards many more years of our strong bilateral relationship to come. Thank you very much, and over to you, Rowan.
Thank you very much, Helen. Austrade's been a phenomenal partner assisting Australian businesses in the Korean market, and we look forward to working with yourself and the Austrade team into the future. Now, building upon your remarks, I'm pleased now to introduce Ruslan Tursunov, the Project Director of Intralink, one of the Chamber's newest members, who will be giving his insights on the recent development on Medtech in the Korean market. Ruslan, welcome and thank you.
Thank you very much, Rowan, for the great introduction. Let me share my screen. All right. So thank you. My name is Ruslan Tursunov. I'm originally from Uzbekistan, but I've lived in South Korea for over 11 years now and fluent in Korean. I started my career as a product manager for biopharma products in a Korean local pharma company, but then moved to Intralink after 3 years. And now I've been working mostly in life sciences and Medtech projects and industries, helping over a couple of dozen clients at Intralink in various sectors, including genomic, precision medicine, advanced health technologies. Intralink, founded in 1990, is an international business development consultancy with a deep specialism in East Asia, with about 90 full-time employees in about 10 offices across East Asia, Europe, the US, and Middle East. We are helping foreign companies to enter those 4 East Asian countries, markets, and having delivered over 1,000 assignments so far, we have established really close relationships with both startups and multinational companies in Korea and Taiwan, Japan, and China. So I'd like to start my presentation with an overview of South Korea. The population of South Korea stood at 51.8 million as of September 2021. That's nearly twice the size of Australian population. And then aging has been becoming a major problem for South Korean government, standing at 16.7 in 2021. But everything would be okay if other things were fine, but the fertility rate was also going down. That's the lowest by world standards, 0.82, despite the government's efforts to encourage births by spending about 250 billion Australian dollars in the past 10 years. With about 2.2 trillion Australian dollar GDP, South Korea is the world's 10th and Asia's 4th largest economy. And the country spends slightly under 5% of its GDP on R&D. That's the highest ratio in the world. And that's why it's no surprise that Korea has been selected as the most innovative nation in 2021 as well, for 7 times out of 9 times by Bloomberg. So Ministry of Health and Welfare provides new universal healthcare under the National Health Insurance System, which covers about 97% of the population. And despite spending only 8% of GDP, the country provides high quality and affordable healthcare, and it was ranked as the 4th most efficient healthcare systems in the world by Bloomberg again. The country boasts with large hospital bed to population ratio, which stood at 13.6 per 1,000 citizens, as that's also highest in the world. And over 62% of demand for advanced medical devices is satisfied by imports from mostly US, Europe, and Japan. And US alone claims about 50% of all imports in Korea. The dominance of a few big hospitals here is quite important to note, because these big 5 hospitals treat about 5% of all outpatients in Korea. And according to some expert estimates, they treat about 70% of all cancer patients. What does it mean? It means these hospitals provide a hotbed for clinical trials. So medical device market size was estimated to have reached 8.8 billion Australian dollars in 2020, making it the 13th largest medical device market in the world. Also, this market is growing at a high rate, like 7% annual growth for the past 5 years. And as mentioned, it's heavily reliant on imports. That's also growing 9% at the 9% for the past 5 years. Top imported medical devices include contact lenses, stents, MRI, CT systems, knee prostheses, and IVD reagents. What are the key drivers? As I mentioned at the beginning, rapid aging of Korea has become a major concern for the government on how to service this large population at an affordable cost that brings demand for devices that can monitor aged people. And another one, it's no secret that Korea is a leading country in terms of providing increasing plastic and specialist surgeries, and also relatively high consumption of alcohol and tobacco, as well as sedentary lifestyle, is increasing the number of non-communicable diseases. Prevalence of diabetes has grown significantly from 1.5% to about 10% in the past 40 years. And it's becoming quite common among children. That's also kind of concerning for the government currently. And they're trying to find some solutions to monitor to help them get over this. And leading causes of death, as you can see, cancer is undoubtedly the leading cause of death, claiming about 30% of all deaths in Korea every year. And if you look at the distribution of cancer by sites, you can see that gastric cancer and thyroid cancer, lung cancer are the major 3 cancers that are happening in Korea. So, of course, market trends are also responsible for the need for digital health and high quality advanced technologies. So in October 2020, the government passed a law which requires all the medical devices to be reviewed for quality every 5 years. In the past, it used to have no expiration date, which meant, right, for example, if a medical device was approved in 2001 or 2002, let's say 20 years ago, it was still in use, but the regulations have changed a lot. So this new regulation means, of course, it's strengthening the approval process, but it means that it will eliminate a lot of competition already for companies from highly regulated countries such as Australia, Japan, and the US. And due to MERS and COVID, there has been a strong drive to improve infection control quality, and also it has been increasing need for digitization, connectivity, and of course, patient data management. What other industry trends? So you can see there is a focus on robotics, telemedicine, companion diagnostics, AI, and big data-based medical devices, wearables, and so on. So these are the major areas of interest in digital health and Medtech area. So health information technologies, of course, Korean hospitals have implemented AMR, AHRs that stood at about 95%, 97% between them, which is really, really high, which provides a quality data for digital health companies who would like to improve or develop their own solutions. And AI big data-based medical devices, since 2017, the Korean government has been focusing on approving more and more medical digital health devices. In 2018, there were only 2-3 devices, but now, as of September, it's over 70. And wearables, of course, wearables were a little bit late to start to be approved. So in 2019, it was sandbox regulated and allowed for only like how can I say just to test. And then in May 2020, the government understood and provided reimbursement. So blockchain, of course, is being tried because of its safe storage and security. Telemedicine in Korea has not been allowed by law, but it doesn't mean it's not being used. The government has been allowing it during the COVID time. What does it mean? It means the hospitals, major hospitals, have these things implemented already, and then they're using when the time was right. So Australian companies can also come in and start providing these services in the future when it opens. So the certification is required for all medical devices in Korea for sale and production. And for regulation purposes, it's classified as class 1 to class 4, while class 1 is only kind of required for a notification. Other classes have to go through kind of certain regulatory processes. National health insurance system is in charge of reimbursement, and the main service payment types are fee for service and DRG, and specific reimbursement code and price are given to certain products. So if your product matches that code, then you're given a certain fixed reimbursement. But if you have an innovative product, then you can come and apply for a separate reimbursement. The government is trying to encourage reimbursement for high innovative products. DRG started as a voluntary system in 2002. In 2013, became mandatory for 7 disease groups only. In 2009, new DRG started, and it's mandatory for 567 disease groups in appointed 98 medical institutions. And also there are some products that are outside of the reimbursable item list, and which are not covered by reimbursement. So I'll be quick. In terms of culture, Koreans, SMEs tend to be fast moving and driven by ad hoc. That's why it requires a lot of flexibility from foreign companies. And sometimes, for example, the boss comes and say, hey, tomorrow I would like to hear about the projects that you were talking about from Australia. Can you make a presentation? So in that case, that person has to go back and forth with you and then communicate and get a lot of information to provide to the CEO. And personal relations are important, but it doesn't mean it cannot start from zeros. And Koreans are also understand this, and then they're open to kind of cold outreach. Okay, some potential challenges. Of course, there is a little brand recognition among companies in South Korea of Australian companies, and there is preference of local service providers over foreign ones due to relationship language, turnaround time and pricing, and very high expectations of product service quality. Therefore, you will need to have a certain person who is kind of caring after your customers. So the market considerations, there are a few things that you need to consider before coming here. Do you need a local partner or your own office? Get it right, otherwise you can it can lead to kind of flat sales or failure. In localization, it really depends. If the product is doctor facing, then no need for translations. But if it's patient facing, then you cannot expect 51 million people to understand English in Korea. So you may need to change it. So regulations are important part of reviews before coming. And local support, this is a must in Korea. And you can expect a doctor to call you at about 6 p.m. on Friday and ask you to fix some of the things that you are providing on Saturday. These are industry-related organizations that you may find useful, and then events that you may want to join in the future. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ruslan, for your overview of the Korean market. Intralink's been a fantastic member of AustCham, and we look forward to working with you into the future. Now, building up on this presentation, we next will hear from Rob Scott, who's the Managing Director of the Australia Asia Technology Incubator, AATI, who will share his insights on connecting the dots and expansion pathways for Australian medtech companies. So, Rob, are you there?
I am indeed. Welcome. Hi, everyone. And really good to be part of this, what I hope is a number of events which continue to sort of showcase and present the opportunities in Korea, and also, of course, the great technology and medical technology coming out of Australia. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that. So basically, I've been here, well, I've been involved in medical technology, I guess, for over 20 years now, and involved in Asia for almost as long, living here in Asia for about 13 years. And our main business at the moment is our incubator accelerator organization, which is basically focuses on developing exactly what we're doing today, which is creating opportunities for Australian medtech, life science, and online healthcare companies into Asian markets. The main program that we have at the moment is in conjunction with Queensland University of Technology and also Life Science Queensland, which is the Life Science Innovation Export Hub, and actually the only federally funded export hub program focusing on medtech or healthcare, actually, as well, out of the 17 which are funded by Oz Industry. So as you see from this slide, our main focus really is helping increase understanding, the opportunities, and in terms of engagement and success from your side, which is as business owners, as startups, as scale-ups, as SMEs, and also research organizations, universities, and research groups. We're there to basically facilitate those opportunities into those markets. And I want to talk today about some of the, I guess, key considerations that keep in the theme of connecting the dots, about how we can actually connect those dots, particularly as the dots have sort of moved a lot, obviously, for all of us in the last year or two. And that's a bit of an example in terms of the aspects that we provide. We have a 4-tiered sort of program. The first level, obviously, in terms of increasing awareness, is through our boot camps. We've run now, I think, in total, probably about 3 dozen, I think, events and boot camps over the last few years. We've helped around 300 startups and scale-ups and SMEs to understand and engage better with Asian healthcare markets. And that's an example of what we're doing. We also then go on to one-on-one mentoring and coaching to sort of work through your market plans, your business plans for engagement into those markets. And then obviously the business matching side as well, to sort of connect you, help connect those dots in terms of those partners, those investors, those customers, which are very key, obviously, to your growth in business. And then to what previously, before COVID, bring companies into markets like Korea. Now it's actually more on a virtual basis, as you'll see here. And we're doing that in Korea with Lighting Up Ventures, which is a great group based in Seoul, very connected with the healthcare market locally and internationally, and very key in terms of our immersion program, which is kicking off in end of next month with them. So that's still open for applications. But really today, I want to talk about the new normal, which is really, the way, as you'll see, sort of, which my staff have put together here, are somewhat dark and, perhaps somewhat worrying slide in terms of the left slide, which is in the blue area, a little bit more basic and direct, those connections, to what we've now got, which is the red one, which is multiferous connections, as we're all connecting and finding the pace of our lives, even though we're largely doing these things from our probably from our home offices or offices, via Zoom, as we are today, are much more complicated and probably frenetic sort of pace in terms of connecting cross-border. It's something that we're obviously doing ourselves and obviously helping many, many companies, organizations do the same. So really, the key thing there is knowing, and I think Ruslan touched on this, as did Helen in their presentations just now. Some of those key aspects that you need to think about. So if you had a plan, you had a market approach to Korea previously, if you're a medtech company, if you're a research organization, what has changed? Obviously quite a lot, in the last year or two. But these are good things to go through anyway, to sort of look at, well, how effective is that plan? What are the key considerations? Who do you sort of, now know? How can you get to know more people? Who do you trust? All these sort of factors are really sort of in there. And, is the Korean market still the same one as before? What has really changed about COVID? I mean, the one of the, I guess, few positive aspects of COVID has been to put the spotlight on healthcare. So to be honest, we're all in the perhaps the sector which has benefited the most from the last couple of years, as tragic and shocking as the last 18 months or so have been globally. It's actually really brought healthcare to the forefront in terms of solutions, speed to market, and also investment attraction as well. And a lot of investors that we know who weren't really into the market previously, perhaps dipping the toe in the water, and now much more engaged and are making active investments. And these are not just in Australia, but obviously throughout Asia. It's the markets that we deal with, not just in Korea, but also ASEAN, China, and elsewhere. So this is something to keep in mind, that the healthcare sector is now positioned in a really strong way. But you need to make sure that those factors which are bringing your technology, your product, your company to the forefront are also not going to impinge it going forward. And how you now engage cross-border is actually quite difficult. So in terms of the number of flights, for example, coming out of Australia in terms of freight, I think the latest figures from ECA, we heard it was still down from about 900 I think a month to about 90 flights from a airlift perspective. So if you've got product which you're actually putting on a plane to go to any market outside of Australia, it's quite difficult, as I'm sure you know, quite expensive, and these things are not as easy as they once were. So to understand your value proposition, really, really important. Understand your business model. How is your business model going to work in a market that you can't physically get to? Or get to easily. So, and as the markets open up, this will become easier and more like, life was before. But in the meantime, we have to all come up with new innovative ways to overcome these opportunities, or overcome these challenges rather, and hopefully create some opportunities. And the main thing about doing this is becoming flexible. So, and that's something you should do anyway. It's something that we try to instill, I guess, in all the cohorts that go through our programs, to be flexible in your approach, in your planning, in your execution, in your partnership. And Ruslan mentioned this as well in his presentation, in terms of being flexible with your approach. You need to be doing this from a cultural perspective, obviously in Korea, but you also need to be doing it from a business perspective as well. You can't expect the same procedures, same approaches that apply in Australia, or if you're looking at, if you're dealing with the US or UK or Europe, to apply in Korea. It's not the same market, as I'm sure you know. So you need to have that flexible mindset to understand, that your partners, your customers, have different agenda, different priorities that you need to address. And it's very, very important to be providing solutions that are relevant and are delivered in a way that's acceptable and easily integrated into into society, into the economy, into the mindset of the other side, in terms of the partners, investors, the customers you're trying to impress. So really what's in it for them, essentially, is what you should keep that in mind. So basically, rethink your engagement strategy, how you're going to now reach those customers and partners. Again, connecting the dots. What are the new ways to do that? Are there online platforms that you could be engaged in, local ones? Are there other ways? Are you engaged with groups like AustCham and Austrade? That's really key, to be honest, to getting the right information, on the ground from the people who are on the ground. And that's really, really important. So, and you may be looking at potentially losing some of those market share, but you can also be looking at gaining new markets as well. So things to look at. And again, basically, the key thing here, of course, is that the market entry side, as I mentioned, is become a lot more circuitous. What was a straightforward sort of dot to dot straight line has now become a much more complicated one. But the good news is it's still very possible. It's still, we're still seeing, many of the companies that we work with still engaging, in fact, succeeding even more into markets in China, and in China, in Korea, in Japan, in ASEAN, in Asia. So it's very, very important to keep that in mind, that the opportunities are there. In fact, if anything, they've grown, but you just need to have a different approach to accessing those. And essentially, you just need to feel your way forward, feel the stones, as the old proverb says, in terms of as you're crossing the stream. So in other words, if you're going through uncharted waters, just go a bit slowly. Don't obviously commit excessive sort of expenditure unnecessarily. Not something that we can do really at the moment anyway, I guess. But important to go slowly, go step by step, and you will get across at the end of the day. So essentially, ultimately, there for reframing your strategy, finding ways to sort of map your new supply chain, and bearing in mind that your supply points, those dots have moved appreciably in some cases, and then identifying and managing those risks is very, very important in terms of what you're doing. And there's some final thoughts there. Just basically, again, you just need to look at your engagement strategy. Again, being flexible, walking through the process in a measured sort of reassuring way, to sort of refining your existing value proposition, and is it the same value that you're presenting for Korea as you are back home or for other markets? Probably not. So you need to refine the ways, find the touch points, and actually identify and connect with those well. And then, connect and reconnect with your customers, your partners, investors. They're all going through the same process on the other side. So try to find ways to meet some of their new needs, some of their sort of potential sort of lacking capabilities or capacities as well. So, something that we can sort of look at, and happy to sort of answer questions in the panel at the end. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Rob. Now, finally, to delve deeper into the experience of Australian medtech companies interested in expanding to Asia, we'll hear from an iconic Australian biotech company, Cochlear, who's a gold sponsor of the Chamber. To start, we'll hear from Jason Chai, who's the Director, Market Access and Government Affairs at Cochlear, who will present on Cochlear's expansion into Asia. Jason, you there? Welcome.
Thank you. And thank you, AustCham, for putting on this great webinar. Today I'll be talking about the reimbursement pathway and the ability to engage with governments in terms of getting the government payer to recognise value in your product. I'll start the presentation off, and then my colleague Stephanie Yoon, who's the managing director of South Korea, will then talk more about the South Korean business. But before we go any further, we'll put on the slides. And that is what Cochlear does. Cochlear is a global leader in implantable hearing solutions with products including cochlear implants, bone conduction implants, and osseointegrated steady-state implants. And since 1981, Cochlear has provided more than 600,000 implantable devices, helping recipients of all ages in more than 180 countries to hear and live full and active lives. Whether these hearing solutions were implanted today or many years ago, Cochlear strives to continuously develop new technology and innovations for all our recipients. Today, I'll be outlining for you how Cochlear seeks to engage with global players, and in particular overseas governments, around Cochlear's comprehensive hearing implant portfolio. Ruslan's already provided you an outline in terms of what happens in South Korea, but noting the fact that the audience will come from not only South Korea, but also Australia, and there are different objectives. I'll give you a more high-level kind of framework in terms of how you communicate value to a government payer, and from that, use Cochlear as an example. And through this value framework, we'll discuss how to build an evidence-based kind of approach to conveying that value. While most markets will rely on private market for customers, it's important not to forget the government payer, which is the single largest payer in every market. The first step in building value is to define the therapy area and identify as accurately as possible the prevalence data that define disease or disability. Now, according to the World Health Organization, today 1 in 6 people are thought to have hearing disability globally. Globally, more than 1.5 billion people experience some decline in their hearing capacity during their life course, of whom at least 430 million will require care. Loss of hearing, if not identified and addressed, can have far-reaching consequences, adversely affecting language development, psychosocial well-being, quality of life, educational attainment, and economic independence at various stages of their lives. Unaddressed, hearing loss imposes a global cost of more than $980 billion annually. Defining value for government payer is understanding the target population. While the prevalence data for the disease area is important to defining the therapy, it is the target area which is important to help government payers know what the exact size of the population is for your specific medical device. For cochlear implants, it is people with severe and profound sensorineural hearing loss, broken down by adults and children. To give you context, profound hearing loss is standing next to a jet engine and not being able to hear it. In South Korea, around 356,000 people have severe to profound sensorineural hearing loss. And this group is divided up between adults and children, where there are different reimbursement rules depending on the specific target population. Stephanie will go into a little more detail about our business in Korea, but I want to highlight at this point that in South Korea, 39% of pediatric recipients are implanted bilaterally. That is, they receive a cochlear implant on both sides of the ears if they have hearing loss in both ears. While only 5% of adults recipients are implanted bilaterally when they have hearing loss in both ears. That disparity comes down to one cause, and that's government reimbursement. In Korea, the government subsidizes children implants, while they don't subsidize adults. I'll have a little bit more to say on that, so just hold that thought for the time being. Governments need help to identify the unmet need. Or put another way, governments need to help to identify solutions, particularly technological ones, to assist them to addressing their society's problems. Cochlear implant is the only solution to the unmet need of congenital sensorineural hearing loss. Children born with congenital sensorineural hearing loss have major adverse development and health impacts on children's lives, including speech and language, literacy, mental health, social and cognitive functioning, educational achievement, and employment and socioeconomic opportunity. Society is structured around the senses of hearing and speech. And if a person can't communicate with these, they need to access special education through other means like sign language. Cochlear implants meet the unmet need of restoring hearing to those that are born with no hearing at all, and give that person the ability to hear and when rehabilitated to be able to attain the educational development that leads to more economic employment and socioeconomic opportunity. After establishing the unmet need, your medical device needs to demonstrate that it is a standard of care. You need to demonstrate that technology is safe and delivers superior clinical benefit. For Cochlear, it was demonstrated that early intervention delivers superior educational outcomes. In Australia, Macquarie University undertook a landmark study called the Longitudinal Outcomes of Children and Hearing Impairment, also known as the LOCHI study. The Lockheed study is a population-based longitudinal study that prospectively evaluates the development of a group of Australian children with hearing loss as they grow up. This study is unique in its inclusion of children whose hearing loss was diagnosed through the universal newborn hearing screening, which many of you will know if you've ever visited a hospital when a newborn has been born. The study asked the following research questions. Does universal newborn hearing screening and early intervention improve the outcomes of children with hearing loss at a population level? What factors influence the outcomes of children with hearing loss? And can early performance predict later outcomes of children with hearing loss? It found that early intervention commencing by 6 months of age results in optimal speech and language development and reduces the need for ongoing special education. Early intervention was found to improve the well-being of families with children who are deaf and to facilitate diagnosis of any additional disabilities. Early intervention is linked to better preschool language development. So that's and once you can establish a clinical benefit, you need to demonstrate to the government the incremental benefit of your intervention versus not doing anything. And this could be measured in terms of individual and societal benefit, although health technology agencies often discount societal benefit. To demonstrate this, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about a study delivered by an organization in Australia called First Voice. And in this First Voice study, 3 in 5 hearing impaired children who received early intervention go on to achieve a tertiary level of qualification, whereas 95 of the auditory verbal therapy graduates from this First Voice study with cochlear implants were heading to mainstream schools. This reduces the need to build more specialist deaf schools at high school and enables cochlear implanted children to be able to participate in learning along with their peers. And once you're able to demonstrate the value of the therapy, you're very close to being able to argue your case for your medical device to be reimbursed. The most critical step is being able to demonstrate the value of the therapy relative to the costs of not treating the disease or disability in the case of hearing loss. Under this First Voice study, the research demonstrated an estimated saving of around $60,000 in avoided school costs achieved through childhood participation in early intervention therapy. For every dollar invested in AVT, early intervention program, there is a $2.20 return on investments, and these include well-being, economic gains, and financial benefits. So the last step is being able to communicate all of the above to the government payer and persuading them to accept your proposed price for the device. And in proposing a price, you need to consider a range of factors, including what factors that particular government is likely to consider around the problem. To demonstrate this, I wanted to, highlight this particular graph and break down the archetypes. On each of the axes, you have value versus costs. That is, value is where people are willing to pay more, whereas costs are people are willing to pay, payers who are willing to pay less. And then on the vertical axis, you have product effectiveness, that is the technology and the effectiveness at addressing that particular disease and disability. And on the other side, you have budget considerations. Now, sprawled on these axes are a number of different countries, but if you had to break them down, you could basically break them down into 4 major archetypes. The first is, the group called the clinical effectiveness archetype. Basically, countries who highly value technological innovation and will pay for innovation where it's above the standard of care. The next is the cost effectiveness group. Within the first group, you'll see countries like France, the Netherlands, Germany, and Japan. The second group is the cost effectiveness group, which is basically trying to do a compromise between cost, but also product effectiveness. And in that bracket, you have countries like Australia, like the United Kingdom, Canada, Sweden, Singapore, and South Korea probably sits in that quadrant. In the third quadrant, you have decentralization and budget optimization archetypes, basically countries which are very conscious about price and they will be very conscious about exactly what price they're paying. And they, as you can see, Brazil, India, China fit inside that kind of quadrant. And the key drivers for them is, how do I deliver the most economic, the most health benefit for the least amount of price? So budget consideration are really important. And then on the others, and the last quadrant, the free private market, it's basically the United States, being a private market where the health insurer is negotiating prices with the medical device company constantly. They will pay for both value, and they'll be very conscious about budgets, in the sense that they'll constantly redefine where the price point should be. But if you have a sense of which country you're going into, you'll have a better sense of exactly which arguments will resonate with them most. So in a country like Australia, you really need to demonstrate and present the evidence for cost effectiveness, whereas in a country like South Korea, you really need to demonstrate the product effectiveness and the technological innovation that you're bringing. And lastly, this is a comparison of how different regimes have treated cochlear implants to date. You'll see in cascading order, Australia down to Malaysia, and whereas Australia has the most available patient access for patients with sensorineural hearing loss, that's broken down into children, adults, and then broken down to reimbursement regimes, both for the bilateral processor but also the sound processor. And for Australia, it's relatively good. In fact, it's probably the best in the world. It's the ecosystem which is most supportive of assisting people who have severe to profound hearing loss. As you go down the scale, you'll see that Japan and South Korea are very, very similar. But I guess the key difference is that Japan, the key similarity is that Japan and Korea both have excellent reimbursement regimes and have universal healthcare. But the one area of difference is where bilateral implantation for adults is not yet available in South Korea. And that comes down to a range of different factors, and a range of that comes down to how the public policy discussion happens around those four axes I was talking about. But I hope that gives you a capture of exactly how cochlear implants fits within the government payer system. I'll now hand over to my colleague Stephanie Yoon, who will then go into a little bit more detail about our business in South Korea.
Before we go any further, please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Stephanie. I've been working for Cochlear Korea as a general manager since June 2018. It's my great honor to present about CI business in Korea market to all of you. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. The topic of my presentation today is bringing Australia's hearing technology innovation to Korea. The presentation has three main sections. Firstly, I will brief about cochlear implant market overview, including demographical trend and market potential. Let me walk you through key growth factors. Lastly, I will come up with our future focus. I will begin by population in Korea. Korea is one of countries decreasing birth rate significantly year by year. Historically, conventional CI surgery cases generated from children, especially from having congenital profound hearing loss. However, with decreasing birth rate, children's CI cases expected to be declined eventually. On the other hand, with entering a super aging society, senior ratio age over 60 years old increased up to 24% out of total population. With this market trend, we are focusing on increasing awareness about CI surgery versus hearing aid for adult patients. Typically, senior patients know about hearing aid, but have low level of acknowledgement about cochlear implantation. Almost half of population lives in Seoul and metropolitan area. Naturally, more than 70% CI business volume generating from metropolitan city. We are living in an era of 100 years old life cycle. Before time, senior patients were afraid of taking CI surgery, even if they are diagnosed sudden hearing loss after age 60 something, mainly due to two reasons. The one is that they may have certain years remain only to live. Surgery cost is a big burden for them considering their residual life. Another reason is that they don't want to give an economic burden to their sons and daughters. However, nowadays, senior patients treat their hearing loss actively, mainly because of long life expectancy and high relevance between hearing loss and dementia. Major scientific journal published many articles related with hearing loss, and it is proven that untreated hearing loss increases the possibility of dementia 5 times higher. Once we look at the market potential, according to Health Insurance Review Agency data, detected severe profound hearing loss patients are 135,000, which shows 40% out of total number of hearing loss people. Annual total market coverage shows only around 0.5%, which means a huge market potential out there. Let's move on to the following stage of the presentation, growth factors. First of all, innovative technology is our core competency, which make us differentiate from competitors. Our product has all those 5 innovative features, which put ourselves in a dominant position in the marketplace and made us possible to be the global #1 player. Secondly, Cochlear Korea increased brand awareness through various kinds of media channels over the last 3 years. In order to inform about our products to surgeons and recipients, educational support are the major activities of Cochlear Korea and main trigger to build our business. Last but not least, after pandemic outbreak, we operated Cochlear Care vehicle to visit each customer who asked us to provide free trial service for new products. While people are reluctant to travel or take public transportation, we visited our customers with company car regardless of region nationwide. The best strategy for us to build a business is let customer feel the difference by free trial of our products. Let's move on to the last slide. We will continuously work on raising awareness about cochlear implants through introducing innovative technology with our products. Educational support is our key success factor for our continuous business growth. Most of all, as Jason highlighted in previous presentation, Cochlear Korea will make every effort to implement reimbursement policy about bilateral hearing, especially for adult patients. Please have a look, 1-minute video.
It listens for the tiny sounds of its prey moving about below, but must take great care not to scare them away.
It shows clearly how much it is crucial to hear with both ears, not only for hearing itself, but also it affects directional ability. Without seeing the object, the fox attack exactly the target. If this fox has 1 ear, he will starve with not able to hunt any food during the winter. To sum up my presentation today, Cochlear Korea, as a #1 company in CI industry, we will try our best to be a lifelong hearing partner with innovative technology and value-added service continuously. Thank you for your attention. If there are any questions, I will do my best to answer them. Now over to Rowan.
Thank you very much, Stephanie and Jason, for your overview of what Cochlear is doing in the market. It's great to see, and Cochlear has been a great friend to not only the chamber, but the business community and Medtech sector as a whole. Now, moving over, we've got a few minutes left, running a little short on time, but we might switch it over to the Q&A section of today's presentation. And I believe Helen is running a little bit short on time. So Helen, if you do need to go, feel free to leave when you can. I've got a question here, and I might start off. This can either be a question for Rob or Ruslan. Is that do you see Korea as a gateway to other medtech markets such as the US or Asia?
Okay, I might jump in there, Owen. I think actually it's an interesting question, and it's something that we've only really been realizing since we've actually been engaging with the market, that obviously Korea is in itself a great market for medical innovation, but also has really good connections with the US, for example, and also with Europe, with Switzerland, Germany, and other sort of Central European nations, making it really quite an ideal sort of, I guess, adjunct market for Australian companies to sort of better position themselves into those broader, I guess, more valuable sort of markets outside of Asia. So, yeah, certainly something I would recommend that companies look at, not just for the Korean market, but also for these other markets. But yeah, over to Ruslan for more detailed commentary.
Sure. While I agree with Rob. While there are some similarities, there are some differences, of course. That's why, for example, Korea, coming to Korea doesn't mean you can easily go to Japan or China, because they have different regulations, they have different cultural aspects and so on. So yes, for example, Korea used to copy a lot of things from Australia or Japan in the past. That's why, of course, there are good similarities. So you can use Korea as a pathway, but don't rely on it too much just because you are in Korea.
Fantastic, thank you. Question for Jason. In addition to the reimbursement regime that you spoke about in your presentation, what are some of the factors influencing Cochlear's decision when expanding into new markets?
So when Cochlear looks at a new market, to the point that I was making before about the target population, that's absolutely critical. Cochlear is akin to a rare disease. It affects roughly 3 people out of every 1,000 people that are born, from a children's perspective, and then depending on the health system, it can affect the adults in a different kind of way. So when Cochlear was started and when it was entering most of those markets, it had to find big markets to start with. And it started in the United States, it started in Europe, and it started in China because it was a very, very big market. But as they build out the business plans into those areas, it was really important also to find the right partners, find the right distributors. And for the most part, we started using our distributor models to start with, but over time, as we got more autonomy and more sophisticated in each of those markets, then we switched over direct presence. So yeah, there's a number of different factors as to why a market entry, what you should consider a market entry, but I think those are probably the top 3 things to think about.
Thank you, Jason, for that answer. I've got one here for Stephanie. What are the unique challenges Cochlear faces in Korea compared to other markets?
As we are doing direct sales in Korea, regardless of COVID situation, we are supposed to do daily routine service to hospitals and our recipients. We never closed our customer service center during pandemic. How to relieve our employees' fatigue level and keep work and life balance is the most challenging thing I've faced with nowadays.
Thank you. I have a question here for Ruslan. Can you give us an example of clinical trials market in Korea, particularly in comparison to Australia? The person who wrote the question says they're interested in understanding the leading CRSOs and the position Korea has within the APAC and Western Pacific region.
Yeah, sure. I actually prepared some slides on this, but because of time limit, I couldn't show. But if you're okay, I could go through really quickly. I'll share my screen. So, yeah. If you go here, CRO market has been growing. Clinical trials, you can see that Seoul has been selected as #1 city for the competitiveness of clinical trials for 2 years recently. And because Korean companies are trying now to enter foreign markets, they are more and more relying on foreign CROs because they have more experience in those countries. And that's why Korea's kind of clinical trials in Korea and outside Korea has been increasing. So you can see the numbers here, local, multinational, and in terms of ranking in the world, Korea is number 3, and multinational, in terms of multinational clinical trials, ranked number 10. And in total, in 2020, it ranked 6. So you can see the kind of other details of this here. And if you look at the providers, IQVIA Korea is kind of the most leading CRO. Novatech, it's an Australian company, is number 3 in terms of numbers of clinical trials that are carrying out, and PPT development and so on. Also, pharma companies are also really active in this. Russia, Korea, and Mr. Korea, but most of them are kind of international companies. But there are some Korean ones, Cheonggeundang, Daewoo Pharma, or let's say Daewon Pharma. Korea's market is really, really competitive. In Asia, it's like after China, number 2. So I would say much more developed than the Australian market, only based on this information. I don't have a lot of info on the Australian market, but I can say that Korea's clinical trial market is much more developed and is growing at a rapid rate. Here you can see that CRO market has grown by 14% in comparison to the world growth of 5.5%.
Fantastic, thank you. We are running short on time, but 2 more questions here. And this is open to anyone. Has anyone got some top tips on efficient ways to reach Korean potential customers?
Well, again, I might sort of jump in. I mean, it really depends in terms of what kind of customers and what kind of business, really. If you're selling products, there's obviously a number of online online sort of platforms that are very useful and very efficient, and means of actually developing a presence and obviously reaching a large amount of customers very quickly. Of course, you need to be able to, of course, not just reach those customers, be able to supply the product. That's a critical thing. So to look at and again getting the right advice from people like here today, and particularly in terms of AustCham, Austrade, Ruslan, to actually understand what those restrictions are. And there's no point really trying to promote a product that you can't sell easily in the market. So it's very important. And then otherwise, obviously, getting good distributors, getting good partners on the ground are very, very critical, and doing right, your proper due diligence and proper connections, I guess, goes back to our theme of connecting the dots, I guess.
Thank you. And Jason and Stephanie, what has Cochlear been doing? You did mention the challenges of COVID before. Have you been doing anything differently these days compared to years ago on how to access the potential market here? I did see that before. You mentioned about going to see your patients in person. Is there any other tips that you can provide?
Before pandemic, we had every weekend actually visited somewhere to recruit candidates. But after pandemic, we have a little bit of limitation, but still we are doing. For example, last week we invited 5 Cochlear candidates family so that we can provide new product information, and then so that they can try our products. So nowadays we made it a little bit small group seminar instead of a big event.
Fantastic. Well, I'm conscious of time. I think we might wrap it up now. I'd like to thank everyone who joined us today. I know there's a few more questions, but we'll take them offline to answer them. And most importantly, I'd like to thank our guest speakers. I'd like to first thank Helen Oh from Austrade. We have Ruslan Tursunov from Intralink, Rob Scott from AATI, and also our GOND sponsors, Jason and Stephanie from Cochlear. Thank you very much for your insights today, and I do look forward to speaking to you all soon. Thank you.
And thank you, Rowan. And